The silence in the mansion is a heavy blanket, suffocating, pressing down on me with an almost physical weight that steals the air from my lungs. I can hear my own heart hammering against my ribs, a frantic, desperate drumbeat echoing in the vast, cold space, a sound so loud I fear it will betray my presence. He's here, just steps away, his presence a cold, undeniable weight that fills the room, making the air thick and unbreathable, a palpable threat that prickles my skin. I'm pressed against the polished wall, every muscle screaming with tension, trying to disappear into the deepest part of the shadows, praying the darkness will swallow me whole, render me invisible to his piercing gaze. My breath hitches, a sharp, painful gasp, as his hand reaches for the light switch, a casual, almost indifferent gesture that promises to shatter my fragile concealment, to expose everything I've fought so hard to hide. "Don't turn on the light," I whisper, the words barely audible, a desperate, raw plea caught in my throat, a final, futile attempt to hold back the inevitable, to prolong this fleeting moment of anonymity. The click of the switch is deafening, a gunshot in the quiet, and then a blinding flood of light. My life, before this mansion, was a carefully constructed mosaic of predictable routines and quiet ambitions. I was a Lara Vance, an architect with a penchant for minimalist design, finding solace in the clean lines and functional beauty of structures. My days revolved around blueprints, client meetings, and the occasional late night spent sketching, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the promise of a new creation. The biggest risk I took was proposing an unconventional material, the most dangerous encounter a disgruntled contractor. My world was one of order, of logic, a stark contrast to the chaotic, unpredictable currents that now threatened to drag me under, pulling me into an abyss I never knew existed, a place where the rules of my old life held no sway, where every shadow held a potential threat, and every silence screamed with unspoken dangers, a reality far removed from the safe, predictable existence I once cherished. The call came like a whisper of fate, an anonymous referral for a high-profile project, redesigning the private wing of an isolated modern mansion. The pay was exorbitant, the client's identity shrouded in a veil of secrecy, and the location, a sprawling estate nestled deep within a secluded, heavily wooded area, felt both alluring and unsettling. I dismissed the unease as professional curiosity, a thrill of the unknown, telling myself that such opportunities were rare and should be seized without hesitation. The mansion itself was a masterpiece of contemporary architecture, all glass, steel, and stark concrete, a fortress disguised as a luxury home, its cold beauty hinting at the formidable power of its owner. Every corner hummed with an unspoken tension, a silent vigilance that permeated the very air, making me feel like an intruder, even as I walked through its grand, echoing halls, a feeling that grew stronger with each passing day, a constant, nagging whisper of danger. My first encounter with Victor, the owner, was a masterclass in controlled intimidation. He wasn't the flamboyant caricature of power I might have imagined. Instead, he was a man of quiet intensity, his eyes like chips of obsidian, missing nothing, revealing less. His tailored suits, expensive watches, and meticulously groomed beard spoke of a man who valued precision and control, a man who commanded respect without uttering a single boastful word. He moved with a predatory grace, his gestures economical, his voice a low, resonant rumble that carried an undeniable authority. He spoke in riddles, in veiled suggestions, his words often carrying a double meaning that left me constantly on edge, trying to decipher the true intent behind his seemingly innocuous requests, a dance of subtle power that kept me perpetually off balance, always guessing, always wary of the hidden depths beneath his calm exterior. The rupture, as I now call it, began subtly, a series of small, unsettling anomalies that chipped away at my professional detachment. A security camera in my private workspace, ostensibly for asset protection, felt more like constant surveillance. Whispers among the staff, quickly silenced when I approached, hinted at a world far more complex and dangerous than I could comprehend. Then came the late-night meetings Victor held, the hushed conversations carried out in a language I didn't understand, The arrival of sleek black SUVs under the cover of darkness, their occupants moving with a silent, disciplined efficiency that spoke volumes. The mansion, once a symbol of architectural ambition, began to feel like a gilded cage, its luxurious amenities serving only to highlight my growing sense of entrapment, a beautiful prison from which escape felt increasingly impossible, each passing day tightening the invisible chains that bound me. My own personal rupture, the one that led to this desperate moment in the dark, happened 2 nights ago. Driven by a gnawing curiosity and a growing sense of dread, I had ventured into a restricted section of the mansion, a sub-basement not on any blueprints I had seen. I found files, encrypted drives, and a chilling collection of surveillance equipment, confirming my worst suspicions. As I tried to leave, a silent alarm tripped, and in my panicked haste to escape unseen, I stumbled, falling awkwardly against a sharp metal edge. The pain was immediate, a searing agony in my side, but the fear of discovery was far greater. I managed to make it back to my room, the wound a throbbing secret beneath my clothes, a constant reminder of my reckless intrusion and the dangerous knowledge I now possessed, a burden that weighed heavily on my conscience, threatening to crush me. The wound, a deep gash just below my ribs, was more than just a physical injury. It was a symbol of my transgression, a visible mark of my foolish bravery. I had managed to clean and bandage it crudely, but the pain was a constant companion, a dull ache that flared into sharp stabs with every movement. The fear of infection was secondary to the fear of discovery. If Victor saw it, if he knew I had been in that forbidden part of his domain, my carefully constructed facade of the innocent architect would crumble, revealing the terrified woman who had dared to peek behind the curtain. The thought of his cold, calculating gaze dissecting my vulnerability, understanding the implications of my injury, sent shivers down my spine, a dread far more potent than any physical discomfort. A terror that gnawed at my very soul, leaving me sleepless and constantly on edge. Tonight, the tension had reached a fever pitch. Victor had summoned me to his private study, a room I usually avoided, its heavy oak door and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves exuding an aura of impenetrable authority. He had been unusually quiet during our last design review, his eyes lingering on me a moment too long, a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher in their depths. I felt his suspicion, a cold tendril wrapping around my heart, tightening with each passing hour. I knew he was testing me, probing for weaknesses, and my injury, hidden beneath a loose blouse, felt like a ticking time bomb, ready to expose my deception at any moment. The air in the mansion felt charged, electric with unspoken threats, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this night would be different. That the fragile peace I had maintained was about to shatter, irrevocably. I had tried to make myself scarce, to blend into the shadows of the vast, dimly lit living area, hoping to avoid his direct gaze, to postpone the inevitable confrontation. The mansion, usually bustling with a quiet efficiency, felt eerily deserted tonight, amplifying every creak of the old wood, every distant hum of the ventilation system. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a drum solo of pure terror, as I heard his footsteps approaching, slow and deliberate, each step echoing through the cavernous space. He wasn't looking for me, not yet, but his trajectory was leading him directly to the light switch, the one that would illuminate my hiding spot, expose my trembling form, and, most damningly, reveal the dark, telltale stain that had begun to seep through my makeshift bandage, a crimson betrayal against the pale fabric of my blouse, a silent scream of my hidden wound. The scent of expensive cologne, a subtle blend of sandalwood and something metallic, reached me before he did, a chilling harbinger of his proximity. My breath hitched, a silent prayer forming on my lips, begging for a miracle, for the darkness to hold, for him to pass by, oblivious. But he didn't. His silhouette, tall and imposing, materialized against the faint glow from the hallway, his hand moving with an almost casual grace towards the switch. My mind raced, frantically searching for an excuse, a diversion, anything to prevent the inevitable. But my voice, when it came, was a mere whisper, raw with desperation, a fragile plea against the crushing weight of his power. "Don't turn on the light," I begged, the words barely escaping my throat, a desperate, last-ditch effort to cling to the anonymity the shadows provided, to keep my secret buried just a little longer, to delay the moment of my inevitable unmasking. My body felt like a live wire, every nerve ending screaming in protest, anticipating the harsh glare that would strip away my carefully constructed facade. The air grew heavy, thick with unspoken tension, as his fingers brushed the cold plastic of the switch. I could feel the heat radiating from his proximity, a stark contrast to the icy dread that had settled deep in my bones. My vision swam, a dizzying mix of fear and the throbbing pain from my side, threatening to overwhelm me. The silence stretched, taut and agonizing, punctuated only by the frantic beat of my own heart, a relentless rhythm that seemed to mock my futile attempts at concealment. I squeezed my eyes shut for a fraction of a second, bracing myself for the inevitable, for the moment when the darkness would be ripped away, revealing not just me, but the damning evidence of my clandestine activities, the wound that screamed of my betrayal. The click was sharp, definitive, a sound that reverberated through the vast space, shattering the fragile peace of the darkness. A flood of light, stark and unforgiving, instantly filled the room, banishing every shadow, every corner where I might have hoped to hide. My eyes, accustomed to the gloom, winced against the sudden assault, but I forced them open, knowing I couldn't afford to look away. Not now. He stood there, his hand still on the switch, his gaze sweeping across the room, methodical, unhurried, like a predator surveying its territory. My breath caught in my throat, a silent scream trapped behind my lips as his eyes landed on me, pinning me against the wall, stripping away my last vestiges of composure. The moment stretched, an eternity compressed into a few agonizing seconds, as his gaze, cold and assessing, traveled slowly down my trembling form, a silent judgment unfolding. His eyes, those dark, unreadable pools, paused, not on my face, not on my trembling hands, but lower, on the telltale stain blooming on my blouse, a stark, crimson flower against the pale fabric, my blood, my secret, exposed. A wave of nausea washed over me, a dizzying mix of pain, fear, and utter defeat. I felt utterly vulnerable, laid bare under his scrutiny, every defense mechanism I possessed crumbling under the weight of his gaze. The air in the room seemed to thicken, growing heavy with the unspoken implications of my injury, of my presence in that forbidden part of his domain. I could feel the blood pounding in my ears, a frantic, desperate rhythm that threatened to drown out all other sensations, all other thoughts, leaving me suspended in a terrifying void of pure, unadulterated dread, waiting for the inevitable storm to break. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, his expression unreadable, his gaze fixed on the wound. The silence was more terrifying than any shout, any accusation. It was a silence filled with implication, with the weight of his unspoken thoughts, his cold, calculating assessment of my situation. My mind raced, trying to anticipate his next move, to formulate a defense, an explanation, but my thoughts were a jumbled mess of fear and pain. The throbbing in my side intensified, a constant, searing reminder of my foolishness, of the precariousness of my position. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead, my hands clammy, my knees threatening to buckle beneath me. This was it, the moment of truth, the instant where my carefully constructed life as Alara Vance, the architect, would collide head-on with the brutal reality of Victor's world, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I would be utterly consumed. The light, once a symbol of exposure, now felt like a spotlight on a stage, highlighting my every flaw, every vulnerability. I could feel the tremor in my limbs, a visible testament to the terror that gripped me. My eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, a hidden door, a shadow to melt into, but there was none. The mansion, with its sleek, modern design, offered no refuge, no place to hide from the penetrating gaze of its owner. Every object in the room, from the minimalist sculptures to the expensive leather furniture, seemed to mock my desperation, my pathetic attempts to cling to a semblance of control in a situation where I had none. I was a deer caught in headlights, frozen, exposed, waiting for the inevitable impact, for the moment when his judgment would descend upon me, crushing me beneath its unforgiving weight, leaving me broken and utterly defeated. My breath came in shallow, ragged gasps, each one a struggle against the tightening knot of fear in my chest. I could feel the warmth of the blood seeping through the fabric, a grim testament to the severity of my injury, a constant burning reminder of the price of my curiosity. The air, once thick with tension, now felt thin, suffocating, as if all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room, leaving me gasping for breath. My vision blurred at the edges, the stark lines of the modern decor wavering, threatening to dissolve into a chaotic swirl of colors and shapes. I felt a profound sense of helplessness wash over me, a chilling realization that I was utterly at his mercy, a pawn in a game I didn't understand, a game where the stakes were my very life, and I had already made a fatal misstep, revealing my hand too soon, too carelessly. His gaze, unwavering, seemed to pierce through my clothes, through my skin, directly into the raw, pulsating wound beneath. It was a look devoid of pity, yet also devoid of immediate anger. It was something far more unsettling, a cold, analytical assessment, as if I were a puzzle piece he was trying to fit into a larger, more complex picture. I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind, calculating the implications of my injury, weighing the consequences of my actions. The silence stretched, taut and agonizing, each second feeling like an hour, as I stood there, exposed and vulnerable, waiting for his verdict. My fate, I realized with a sickening lurch in my stomach, hung precariously in the balance, dependent entirely on the inscrutable thoughts of this dangerous man, a man whose power was absolute, whose decisions were final, and whose mercy, if it existed at all, was a rare and fleeting commodity. The light, once a symbol of exposure, now felt like a spotlight on a stage, highlighting my every flaw, every vulnerability, every desperate attempt to conceal the truth. I could feel the tremor in my limbs, a visible testament to the terror that gripped me, a physical manifestation of the fear that had taken root deep within my soul. My eyes darted around the room, searching frantically for an escape, a hidden door, a shadow to melt into, but there was none. The mansion, with its sleek, modern design, offered no refuge, no place to hide from the penetrating gaze of its owner, its cold, unyielding surfaces reflecting my own desperate image back at me, a stark reminder of my predicament. Every object in the room, from the minimalist sculptures to the expensive leather furniture, seemed to mock my desperation, my pathetic attempts to cling to a semblance of control in a situation where I had none, where I was utterly at his mercy. His eyes, those dark, unreadable pools, finally shifted from my wound, slowly rising to meet mine. There was no surprise, no shock, only a deep, unsettling calm that sent a fresh wave of dread through me. It was as if he had expected this, as if my injury was merely a confirmation of a suspicion he had harbored all along. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk played on his lips, a fleeting expression that vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving his face a mask of impenetrable neutrality. He took a slow, deliberate step towards me, and then another, closing the distance between us, his presence growing more imposing with each movement. My breath hitched, a silent scream trapped behind my lips, as I instinctively pressed myself further against the wall, trying to become one with the cold, unyielding surface, to somehow disappear from his terrifying proximity, to escape the inevitable confrontation that loomed. "Ilara," he said, his voice a low, resonant rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards. "What have you done?" His tone was devoid of anger, yet it carried an undeniable weight, a chilling undercurrent of authority that made my blood run cold. It wasn't a question seeking information, it was a statement of fact, a declaration that he already knew, or at least suspected, the truth. My mind raced, frantically searching for an explanation, a lie, anything to deflect his scrutiny, but my tongue felt thick and useless in my mouth. The throbbing in my side intensified, a constant searing reminder of my foolishness, of the precariousness of my position, of the dangerous game I had unwittingly stumbled into. I could feel the cold sweat break out on my forehead, my hands clammy, my knees threatening to buckle beneath me, betraying my inner turmoil. He stopped just a few feet from me, close enough for me to discern the faint scent of his expensive cologne, a blend of sandalwood and something metallic, a chilling harbinger of his proximity. His gaze was unwavering, piercing, dissecting every inch of my being, stripping away my last vestiges of composure. "That's a nasty cut," he observed, his voice still calm, almost conversational, yet laced with an unnerving edge. "You're bleeding." The simple statement, delivered with such detached precision, felt like an accusation, a pronouncement of my guilt. I could feel the warmth of the blood seeping through the fabric, a grim testament to the severity of my injury, a constant, burning reminder of the price of my curiosity, of the dangerous knowledge I now possessed, a burden that weighed heavily on my conscience, threatening to crush me under its immense weight. My eyes darted to his hand, which had, moments ago, been on the light switch. Now, it rested casually at his side, but I noticed the subtle bulge beneath his tailored jacket, the unmistakable outline of a weapon, a gun. The realization sent a fresh wave of terror through me, a cold, sickening lurch in my stomach. He hadn't pulled it out, hadn't threatened me directly, but its implied presence was a far more potent threat, a silent promise of the brutal reality that underpinned his world. It was a stark reminder that I was not dealing with a disgruntled client, but with a man who lived by a different code, a code where violence was an ever-present possibility, a tool to enforce his will, to maintain his absolute control over his domain, and over anyone who dared to cross him, even inadvertently as I had done. I fell, I stammered, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth, thin and transparent, even to my own ears. My voice was a shaky whisper, betraying my fear, my desperation to cling to any semblance of innocence. He merely raised an eyebrow, a subtle gesture that spoke volumes, conveying his utter disbelief without a single word. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with unspoken accusations, with the weight of his knowledge. I could feel his gaze dissecting my every tremor, every flicker of fear in my eyes, peeling back the layers of my deception with unnerving precision. It was a silent interrogation, far more effective than any shouted questions, forcing me to confront the futility of my lies, the impossibility of concealing the truth from a man who seemed to see right through me, into the very depths of my terrified soul. "Fell," he repeated, the single word hanging in the air, dripping with sarcasm, a mocking echo of my pathetic attempt at an excuse. He took another step, closing the gap further, his proximity overwhelming, suffocating. "In my house? In a section of my house that is strictly off-limits to guests, even those with architectural privileges?" His voice remained calm, almost conversational, but the steel beneath the velvet was unmistakable, a chilling promise of retribution. My mind raced, frantically searching for another lie, a more plausible explanation, but my thoughts were a jumbled mess of fear and pain. The throbbing in my side intensified, a constant searing reminder of my foolishness, of the precariousness of my position, of the dangerous game I had unwittingly stumbled into, a game where the stakes were my very life, and I had already made a fatal misstep. He reached out, his hand moving slowly, deliberately, towards my side. I flinched, a visceral reaction of pure terror, expecting a blow, a harsh reprimand. But his fingers, surprisingly gentle, brushed against the blood-soaked fabric, a light, almost clinical touch that sent shivers down my spine. "This isn't a fall, Ilara," he stated, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous murmur. "This is a struggle, or an escape." His words were a direct hit, piercing through my flimsy defenses, exposing the raw truth of my actions. I could feel the heat radiating from his hand, a stark contrast to the icy dread that had settled deep in my bones, a chilling reminder of his proximity, of his power, of the terrifying reality that I was utterly at his mercy, trapped in his domain, with no hope of escape. My breath caught in my throat, a silent gasp of defeat. There was no point in denying it anymore. He knew. He had known all along, perhaps even before I had stumbled into that forbidden basement. My carefully constructed facade, my pretense of innocence, had crumbled under the weight of his unwavering gaze, his cold, analytical assessment. I felt utterly vulnerable, laid bare under his scrutiny, every defense mechanism I possessed crumbling under the weight of his gaze. The air in the room seemed to thicken, growing heavy with the unspoken implications of my injury, of my presence in that forbidden part of his domain. I could feel the blood pounding in my ears, a frantic, desperate rhythm that threatened to drown out all other sensations, all other thoughts, leaving me suspended in a terrifying void of pure, unadulterated dread, waiting for the inevitable storm to break, for his judgment to descend upon me. "You were looking for something, weren't you?" he continued, his voice still calm, but with an underlying current of menace that made my blood run cold. "Something you shouldn't have found." He withdrew his hand, and for a moment, I thought he would turn away, dismiss me, perhaps even call his men. But instead, his gaze softened, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift that sent a jolt of confusion through me. It wasn't pity, not exactly, but something akin to a strange, calculating curiosity, a flicker of interest in my predicament that was far more unsettling than outright anger. It was the look of a predator who had cornered its prey, not to kill it immediately, but to observe it, to understand its movements, to gauge its potential usefulness. A chilling realization that I was now a part of his intricate, dangerous game. "You're in over your head, Alara," he said, his voice now almost gentle, a stark contrast to the implied threat of his words. "This isn't your world. You don't understand the rules." He paused, letting his words sink in, letting the weight of their meaning settle upon me. My mind raced, trying to decipher his intentions, to understand why he wasn't immediately condemning me, why he was speaking to me with such a strange, almost paternal tone. Was this a test? A manipulation? Or was there something else at play? Something I couldn't possibly comprehend? The moral dilemma was immediate and suffocating. Confess, and perhaps face his wrath, or continue to lie and risk a far worse fate. My initial mission, whatever it truly was, felt distant, irrelevant, overshadowed by the immediate, terrifying reality of my predicament, my very survival hanging by a thread. He took another step back, creating a small space between us, a subtle gesture that felt both like a reprieve and a further entanglement. "I can help you with that wound," he offered, his gaze still fixed on my face, searching for a reaction, for a sign of my compliance. "But nothing comes for free, Alara, especially not in my house." The words hung in the air, a chilling proposition, a clear indication that any assistance he offered would come with a steep price, a debt that would bind me to him, drawing me deeper into his dangerous world. My heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs as I weighed his offer, understanding that it wasn't an act of kindness, but a strategic move, a way to exert his control, to make me an unwilling participant in his intricate web of power and intrigue, a pawn in his dangerous game. The choice was stark, brutal in its simplicity: accept his help and become beholden to him, a prisoner in all but name, or refuse, and face the unknown consequences, perhaps even death, alone and injured in his isolated mansion. The thought of bleeding out, of being discovered by his men, sent a fresh wave of terror through me. My initial mission, whatever it truly was, felt distant, irrelevant, overshadowed by the immediate, terrifying reality of my predicament, my very survival hanging by a thread. I looked into his dark, unreadable eyes, searching for a hint of mercy, a flicker of humanity, but found only a cold, calculating resolve. He was offering me a lifeline, but it was a rope woven from his own dangerous threads, a rope that would pull me deeper into his abyss, making me an unwilling participant in his dark empire, a silent accomplice to his unspoken crimes. My breath hitched, a silent gasp of resignation. I was trapped, caught between a rock and a hard place, with no escape in sight. The mansion, once a symbol of architectural ambition, now felt like a gilded cage, its luxurious amenities serving only to highlight my growing sense of entrapment, a beautiful prison from which escape felt increasingly impossible, each passing day tightening the invisible chains that bound me. I nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement, but it was enough, a silent acknowledgement of my defeat, of my unwilling acceptance of his terms. The decision, though forced, felt like a surrender, a crossing of a line from which there would be no return, a pact with the devil that would forever alter the course of my life, pulling me into a darkness I could never have imagined, a world where innocence was a luxury I could no longer afford. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, a fleeting expression that vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving his face a mask of impenetrable neutrality. "Good," he murmured, the single word a chilling affirmation of my new reality. "Now let's get you cleaned up. We have things to discuss." His gaze lingered on me for another moment, a silent promise of the difficult conversations to come, of the revelations that would undoubtedly bind me further to his world. I felt a cold dread settle deep in my stomach, a chilling realization that my life, as I knew it, was irrevocably over. I was no longer Alara Vance, the architect. I was now something else, something far more dangerous, a pawn in Victor's intricate game, a secret keeper in his shadowy empire, my fate inextricably linked to his, for better or for worse, a terrifying prospect that left me breathless. The gun, still holstered beneath his jacket, felt like a silent, ever-present threat, a constant reminder of the power he wielded, of the brutal reality that underpinned his world. He hadn't needed to draw it, hadn't needed to explicitly threaten me. Its mere presence, its implied capability, was enough to enforce his will, to ensure my compliance. It was a stark lesson in the subtle art of intimidation, a chilling demonstration of how power could be exerted without a single violent act. I understood then, with a sickening clarity, that I was not just a guest in his house, but a captive, bound by circumstances, by fear, and now, by a desperate need for survival. The path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, fraught with danger, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I would have to navigate it with extreme caution, every step a calculated risk, every word a potential trap. The sterile scent of antiseptic filled the air, a stark contrast to the opulent surroundings of the mansion's private medical suite. Victor, with a surprising efficiency, had personally overseen the cleaning and dressing of my wound, his movements precise, almost clinical, yet devoid of any warmth or empathy. His hands, which I had imagined to be rough and calloused from a life of command, were surprisingly deft, his touch firm but not unkind. This unexpected display of care, however, did little to alleviate the gnawing dread in my stomach. It felt less like an act of compassion and more like an investment, a calculated move to ensure his new asset, me, was in working order. I was no longer just a trespasser. I was now a resource, a tool, and that realization was far more terrifying than any physical pain, a chilling confirmation of my new, precarious status within his dangerous domain. As he finished, securing the final strip of medical tape, his gaze met mine in the reflection of the polished steel instruments. "Now, Alara," he began, his voice a low, dangerous murmur that sent shivers down my spine. "We need to talk about what you saw and what you know." The casual tone belied the gravity of his words, each one a hammer blow against my fragile composure. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure terror, as I tried to formulate a response, a defense, anything to mitigate the inevitable consequences of my actions. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with unspoken threats, with the weight of his unspoken expectations, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was the moment of reckoning, the true climax of my ill-fated intrusion, a confrontation I had desperately tried to avoid. He leaned back, crossing his arms over his chest, his posture relaxed, yet radiating an undeniable power that filled the room. "I don't appreciate uninvited guests in my private affairs," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion, a cold, hard edge beneath the calm surface, especially those who go poking around where they don't belong. My breath hitched, a silent gasp of fear, as I felt the full weight of his displeasure descend upon me. This was the anger I had anticipated, the cold, calculating fury of a man whose privacy had been violated, whose secrets had been threatened. My mind raced, frantically searching for an explanation, a plea for mercy, but my tongue felt thick and useless in my mouth, paralyzed by the sheer terror that gripped me, rendering me utterly speechless, utterly helpless in the face of his formidable presence. "Tell me everything," he commanded, his voice dropping to a whisper that was more menacing than any shout. "Every file you saw, every name, every detail. Don't leave anything out. Your life, Alara, depends on your honesty." The words were a direct hit, a chilling confirmation of the stakes involved, of the brutal reality that my very existence hung precariously in the balance. I could feel the cold sweat break out on my forehead, my hands clammy, my knees threatening to buckle beneath me. The throbbing in my side intensified, a constant searing reminder of my foolishness, of the precariousness of my position, of the dangerous game I had unwittingly stumbled into, a game where the stakes were my very life, and I had already made a fatal misstep, revealing my hand too soon, too carelessly, to a man who held all the cards. The moral dilemma was immediate and suffocating. I had stumbled upon evidence of illicit activities, of a vast clandestine network, and now I was being forced to betray my own conscience, to become an unwilling accomplice. My journalistic instincts screamed at me to resist, to protect the truth, but the primal urge for survival was far stronger, a desperate guttural cry that drowned out all other considerations. I looked into his dark, unreadable eyes, searching for a hint of mercy, a flicker of humanity, but found only a cold, calculating resolve. He was offering me a choice, but it was an illusion, a false pretense of agency in a situation where I had none, where my only real option was to comply, to surrender to his will, to become a part of his dark world, a silent participant in his dangerous schemes. I began to speak, my voice a shaky whisper, recounting every detail I could remember from the files, every name, every date, every cryptic reference. Each word felt like a betrayal, a piece of my soul I was sacrificing to this man, to this dark empire. I watched his face as I spoke, searching for any reaction, any sign that I was giving him what he wanted, but his expression remained impassive, a mask of impenetrable neutrality. He listened intently, his gaze unwavering, occasionally nodding almost imperceptibly, a subtle gesture that indicated his absorption of the information, his processing of my forced confession. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with the weight of my words, with the chilling implications of the secrets I was now revealing, secrets that would undoubtedly bind me further to his dangerous world, making me an unwilling participant in his intricate web of power and intrigue. As I finished, my voice hoarse, my throat dry, a profound silence descended upon the room, broken only by the frantic beat of my own heart. He continued to stare at me, his eyes like chips of obsidian, missing nothing, revealing less. The silence stretched, taut and agonizing, each second feeling like an hour, as I waited for his verdict, for the inevitable judgment that would seal my fate. I felt utterly vulnerable, laid bare under his scrutiny, every defense mechanism I possessed crumbling under the weight of his gaze. My mind raced, frantically trying to anticipate his next move, to understand what he would do with the information I had just provided, how he would use it to further his own dark agenda, and how it would ultimately impact my own precarious existence within his formidable domain. Then, he did something unexpected. He stood up, walked to a nearby table, and picked up a small, ornate pistol, its polished metal gleaming under the harsh medical lights. My breath hitched, a silent scream trapped behind my lips, as a fresh wave of terror washed over me. This was it, I thought, the end. He had heard what he needed to hear, and now he would silence me, eliminate the loose end, ensure that his secrets remained buried. My eyes widened in fear, fixed on the weapon, my body tensing, bracing for the inevitable impact, for the moment when my life would be extinguished, brutally and without mercy, in this sterile, opulent room, a chilling testament to the unforgiving nature of his world, a world where life was cheap and secrets were guarded with lethal force. "Don't worry, Alara," he said, his voice surprisingly calm, almost reassuring, as he turned the gun over in his hand, examining its intricate engravings. "This isn't for you. Not yet, anyway." The words, meant to be a reprieve, felt more like a chilling promise, a subtle threat that my fate was still very much in his hands, that my life was merely on an extended lease, subject to his whims. He then, with a deliberate, almost theatrical gesture, placed the gun down on the table, its cold metal clinking softly against the glass surface. The sound, though small, resonated through the room, a stark symbol of his power, of his ability to choose life or death, to grant mercy or deliver judgment, a chilling reminder that I was utterly at his mercy, a pawn in his dangerous game, my survival dependent entirely on his inscrutable will. He turned back to me, his gaze once again piercing, analytical. "You've proven yourself. Useful," he stated, the word useful hanging in the air, devoid of any positive connotation, instead carrying the weight of a burden, a new form of servitude. "You have a good memory, a keen eye for detail, qualities I can appreciate." My mind reeled, trying to process his words, to understand the implications of his unexpected assessment. Was this a compliment? A veiled threat? Or was he simply stating a fact, a cold, objective evaluation of my capabilities? The moral dilemma was immediate and suffocating. Embrace this new, dangerous role, or resist and face the unknown consequences. My initial mission, whatever it truly was, felt distant, irrelevant, overshadowed by the immediate, terrifying reality of my predicament, my very survival hanging by a thread. "You're no longer just an architect, Alara," he continued, his voice now carrying a note of finality, a pronouncement of my new, inescapable reality. "You're part of something bigger now, something you can't walk away from." The words were a direct hit, piercing through my flimsy defenses, exposing the raw truth of my situation. I was trapped, caught in his web, an unwilling participant in his dark empire. The realization sent a cold dread settling deep in my stomach, a chilling certainty that my life, as I knew it, was irrevocably over. I was no longer Alara Vance, the architect. I was now something else, something far more dangerous, a secret keeper in his shadowy world, my fate inextricably linked to his, for better or for worse, a terrifying prospect that left me breathless, utterly consumed by the weight of my new, inescapable reality. He walked past me, towards the door, his movements fluid, silent, like a predator moving through its territory. "Get some rest," he commanded, his voice a low, resonant rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards. "We have work to do." He paused at the threshold, turning his head slightly, his dark eyes meeting mine for a final unsettling moment. "And Ilara," he added, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips, "try not to fall again. It tends to be messy." The words were a chilling reminder of his power, of his knowledge, of the fact that he saw everything, knew everything, and that my every move would now be under his watchful, unforgiving eye, a constant, suffocating surveillance that would leave me no room to breathe, no space to escape his formidable grasp. The door clicked shut behind him, plunging the room into a sudden, oppressive silence. I stood there, trembling, the antiseptic scent now mingling with the lingering scent of his expensive cologne, a chilling reminder of his recent proximity, of the terrifying encounter that had just transpired. My wound, though bandaged, throbbed with renewed intensity, a physical manifestation of the emotional trauma I had just endured. I was alive, yes, but at what cost? My freedom, my innocence, my very identity, all seemed to have been stripped away, replaced by a new, terrifying reality. I was no longer a free agent, no longer in control of my own destiny. I was now a pawn, a tool, bound to Victor's will, an unwilling participant in his dark, dangerous world, my future shrouded in an impenetrable fog of uncertainty and dread. The gun, still lying on the table, gleamed under the harsh lights, a silent testament to the power he wielded, to the brutal reality that underpinned his world. He hadn't needed to use it, hadn't needed to explicitly threaten me. Its mere presence, its implied capability, was enough to enforce his will, to ensure my compliance. It was a stark lesson in the subtle art of intimidation, a chilling demonstration of how power could be exerted without a single violent act. I understood then, with a sickening clarity, that I was not just a guest in his house, but a captive, bound by circumstances, by fear, and now, by a desperate need for survival. The path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, fraught with danger, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that I would have to navigate it with extreme caution, every step a calculated risk, every word a potential trap, every breath a silent prayer for deliverance. My reflection in the polished steel of the medical instrument stared back at me, a pale, haunted face with wide, terrified eyes. I barely recognized the woman looking back. The architect, the woman who found solace in clean lines and functional beauty, was gone, replaced by a shadow, a ghost of her former self. The mansion, once a symbol of architectural ambition, now felt like a gilded cage, its luxurious amenities serving only to highlight my growing sense of entrapment, a beautiful prison from which escape felt increasingly impossible, each passing day tightening the invisible chains that bound me. I was trapped, caught in his web, an unwilling participant in his dark empire, and the chilling realization settled deep in my bones. My life, as I knew it, was irrevocably over, replaced by a terrifying new existence, a constant dance on the precipice of danger. The silence of the room, once a comfort, now felt oppressive, suffocating, amplifying the frantic beat of my own heart, the throbbing pain in my side, the chilling echo of Victor's words. I was alone, yet I felt his presence everywhere, in every shadow, in every creak of the old wood, in the very air I breathed. He had not just bandaged my wound, he had bound me to him, inextricably linking my fate to his dark world, to his dangerous schemes. The weight of this new reality pressed down on me, a crushing burden that threatened to overwhelm me, to break me completely. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the harsh light, the sterile surroundings, the terrifying implications of my new reality, but the images of the files, of his cold, unreadable eyes, of the gun on the table, were seared into my mind, an indelible mark of my new, inescapable predicament. The days that followed blurred into a surreal existence, a twisted parody of my former life. I was still Alara Vance, the architect, at least on the surface. My work on the mansion's private wing continued, but now every blueprint felt like a map of my own entrapment. Every design choice a subtle nod to the invisible bars of my gilded cage. Victor's presence was a constant, pervasive force, a silent shadow that followed my every move, even when he wasn't physically present. His brazo derecho, a man named Silas, with eyes that missed nothing and a demeanor as cold as polished steel, became my constant companion, ostensibly my project manager, but in reality, my watchful guard. His silent presence was a chilling reminder of my new reality, a constant, suffocating surveillance that left me no room to breathe, no space to escape his formidable grasp, no moment of true solitude. My conversations with Victor were now less about design and more about information. He would casually drop questions, veiled inquiries about the outside world, about specific individuals or organizations, testing my knowledge, gauging my connections. I found myself sifting through my memories, recalling snippets of news, professional gossip, anything that might be of value to him, anything that might buy me another day of uneasy peace. Each piece of information I offered felt like a further entanglement, a tightening of the invisible threads that bound me to his network. The moral compromises piled up, a heavy weight on my conscience, each one chipping away at the person I once was, leaving me feeling hollowed out, a mere shell of my former self, a silent accomplice in his dangerous clandestine operations. The mansion, once a symbol of architectural ambition, now felt like a living, breathing entity, its walls whispering secrets, its shadows concealing dangers. I learned to read the subtle cues, the sudden silence of the staff, the arrival of a specific black SUV, the hushed tones of Victor's phone calls. Each signal was a piece of a larger, terrifying puzzle, a glimpse into the intricate workings of his empire. My senses became heightened, hyper-aware of every sound, every movement, every shift in the atmosphere. Paranoia became my constant companion, a cold, creeping dread that settled deep in my bones, making me question every interaction, every seemingly innocuous gesture, every word spoken, constantly searching for hidden meanings, for veiled threats, for the next twist in this dangerous, unpredictable narrative. One evening, Victor summoned me to his study, the same room where my fate had been sealed. He sat behind his massive desk, a single expensive whiskey glass in his hand, the amber liquid swirling hypnotically. "Ilara," he began, his voice a low, resonant rumble. "I have a new project for you, one that requires your unique talents." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure terror, as I braced myself for what was to come. I knew this wasn't about architecture. This was about something far more dangerous, something that would push me further into the abyss, irrevocably altering the course of my life, making me an even deeper, more complicit participant in his dark, clandestine world, a silent accomplice to his unspoken crimes, a pawn in his intricate, dangerous game. He slid a folder across the polished surface of the desk. Inside, I found photographs, documents, and a detailed dossier on a prominent city councilman, a man known for his anti-corruption stance. My breath hitched, a silent gasp of horror, as I understood the implication. "He's becoming a problem," Victor stated, his voice devoid of emotion, a cold, hard edge beneath the calm surface. "Your job is to find his weakness, something we can use, something that will make him amenable to our suggestions." The words were a direct hit, a chilling confirmation of the stakes involved, of the brutal reality that I was now being asked to actively participate in his illicit activities, to become a direct instrument of his power, a willing participant in his dangerous schemes, a betrayal of everything I once stood for. The moral dilemma was immediate and suffocating. I was being asked to compromise a public servant, to undermine the very principles of justice I had always believed in. My conscience screamed in protest, a desperate guttural cry that threatened to overwhelm me, but the primal urge for survival, the chilling memory of the gun on the table, of Silas's watchful eyes, was far stronger. I looked into Victor's dark, unreadable eyes, searching for a hint of mercy, a flicker of humanity, but found only a cold, calculating resolve, a chilling confirmation that he expected my full compliance, my absolute obedience, without question, without hesitation, without any moral qualms whatsoever. A terrifying realization that left me feeling utterly hollowed out, a mere shell of my former self, a silent accomplice in his dangerous, clandestine operations. I don't know anything about this kind of work," I stammered, my voice a shaky whisper, betraying my fear, my desperation to cling to any semblance of innocence. He merely raised an eyebrow, a subtle gesture that spoke volumes, conveying his utter disbelief without a single word. "You're an architect, Ilara," he replied, his voice calm, almost conversational, yet laced with an unnerving edge. "You understand structures. You understand how to find the weak points, how to exploit them. Human nature is no different." His words were a chilling reinterpretation of my profession, twisting my skills into a tool for his dark purposes, a terrifying realization that I was now being forced to use my talents for destruction, for manipulation, for the furtherance of his illicit empire, a profound betrayal of my own ethical compass. Silas, who had been standing silently by the door, took a step forward, his presence a subtle but undeniable threat. His eyes, cold and unwavering, met mine, a silent warning against any form of resistance. The unspoken message was clear: comply, or face the consequences. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with unspoken threats, with the weight of his unspoken expectations, and I knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was not a request, but an order, a command that left me no room for negotiation, no space for refusal, no possibility of escape from the intricate web of power and intrigue that now bound me inextricably to Victor's dangerous world, making me an unwilling participant in his dark, clandestine operations. I picked up the folder, my fingers trembling as I felt the weight of the documents, the chilling implications of the task before me. Each page felt like a step further into the abyss, a deeper descent into a world of moral ambiguity and danger. My initial mission, whatever it truly was, felt distant, irrelevant, overshadowed by the immediate, terrifying reality of my predicament, my very survival hanging by a thread. I was trapped, caught in his web, an unwilling participant in his dark empire, and the chilling realization settled deep in my bones. My life, as I knew it, was irrevocably over. I was no longer Alara Vance, the architect. I was now something else, something far more dangerous, a secret keeper in his shadowy world, my fate inextricably linked to his, for better or for worse, a terrifying prospect that left me breathless, utterly consumed by the weight of my new, inescapable reality. The days that followed were a blur of clandestine research, late-night surveillance, and the sickening realization of what I was becoming. I used my architectural background to analyze the councilman's public life, his routines, his connections, searching for the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. The irony was not lost on me. I was using the same skills I once employed to build and create, now to dismantle and destroy. Each piece of incriminating evidence I uncovered felt like a piece of my soul I was sacrificing, a further descent into the moral quagmire of Victor's world. The lines between right and wrong blurred, distorted by the constant pressure, the pervasive fear, the chilling understanding that my own survival depended on my ability to adapt, to become a part of the darkness that now surrounded me, threatening to consume me whole. I found it, eventually. Not a grand scandal, but a quiet, deeply personal vulnerability, a hidden medical condition of his child, requiring expensive, experimental treatment, a secret he had guarded fiercely, fearing public scrutiny and political backlash. The discovery sent a wave of nausea through me, a sickening realization that I was now holding the key to his destruction, a weapon far more potent than any gun. It was a betrayal of the most intimate kind, a violation of his family's privacy, and the thought of presenting this information to Victor, of seeing the cold, calculating satisfaction in his eyes, made my stomach churn, a profound sense of guilt and self-loathing washing over me, leaving me feeling utterly defiled, utterly corrupted by the darkness I had been forced to embrace. When I presented my findings to Victor, his reaction was precisely as I had feared. A slow, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, a fleeting expression that vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving his face a mask of impenetrable neutrality. "Excellent, Alara," he murmured. The single word a chilling affirmation of my new reality, of my unwilling complicity. "You truly do have a unique talent for finding the weak points." His gaze lingered on me for a moment, a silent promise of the difficult conversations to come, of the revelations that would undoubtedly bind me further to his world, making me an even deeper, more complicit participant in his dangerous, clandestine operations, a silent accomplice to his unspoken crimes, a pawn in his intricate, dangerous game. The councilman, predictably, became amenable. His public stance softened, his investigations stalled, and soon he was quietly supporting Victor's interests, his integrity sacrificed on the altar of his child's health. I watched from a distance, a silent witness to the destruction I had wrought, the moral decay I had facilitated. The victory felt hollow, tainted by the profound sense of guilt that gnawed at my conscience, a constant, burning reminder of the price of my survival. I was alive, yes, but at what cost? My freedom, my innocence, my very identity, all seemed to have been stripped away, replaced by a new, terrifying reality, a constant dance on the precipice of danger, a life lived in the shadows, forever bound to the man who had forced me to betray my own soul. My relationship with Victor shifted again. I was no longer just an architect, no longer just an informant. I was now something akin to a strategist, a problem solver, a silent partner in his clandestine operations. He began to consult me on other issues, always framed as architectural challenges, but always with a hidden agenda, a subtle manipulation of power, a quiet dismantling of obstacles. I found myself adapting, my mind, once focused on aesthetics and functionality, now trained to identify vulnerabilities, to anticipate threats, to navigate the treacherous currents of his world. The transformation was insidious, gradual, a slow erosion of my former self, leaving me feeling like a stranger in my own skin, a ghost haunting the opulent halls of this gilded cage, a silent accomplice to crimes I once would have condemned without hesitation. The ambiguity of my situation was perhaps the most unsettling aspect. I was not a prisoner, not in the traditional sense. I had the run of the mansion, access to its luxurious amenities, even a semblance of my architectural work. Yet I was utterly trapped, bound by fear, by knowledge, by the chilling understanding that escape was not an option. Silas remained my shadow, a constant, silent reminder of my lack of freedom, his watchful eyes a perpetual surveillance. My future was a murky, uncertain landscape, shrouded in the impenetrable fog of Victor's intentions. I was alive, yes, but my life was no longer my own. A chilling realization that settled deep in my bones, a constant, suffocating weight that pressed down on me, threatening to crush me completely, leaving me utterly broken and utterly defeated. The mansion, with its stark, modern beauty, became both my sanctuary and my prison. Its isolated location, once a source of unease, now felt like a necessary shield, protecting me from the outside world, from the consequences of my actions, from the person I was becoming. I walked its gleaming halls, a ghost in my own life, my mind constantly replaying the events that had led me here, searching for a way out, a path to redemption, a glimmer of hope in the overwhelming darkness. But each path seemed to lead only deeper into the labyrinth, further into Victor's intricate web of power and intrigue, making me an even more complicit participant in his dangerous, clandestine operations, a silent accomplice to his unspoken crimes, a pawn in his intricate, dangerous game, my fate inextricably linked to his, for better or for worse, a terrifying prospect that left me breathless, utterly consumed by the weight of my new, inescapable reality. The mansion, with its stark modern beauty, remains my gilded cage, a monument to my lost innocence and my unwilling transformation. I walk its gleaming halls, a ghost in my own life, my mind constantly replaying the events that led me here, searching for a way out, a path to redemption, a glimmer of hope in the overwhelming darkness. But each path seems to lead only deeper into the labyrinth, further into Victor's intricate web of power and intrigue. My days are a delicate dance of compliance and subtle resistance, a constant negotiation between the person I once was and the person I am forced to become. The councilman's quiet capitulation serves as a chilling reminder of the power I now wield, a power born of manipulation and fear, a power that corrodes my soul with each passing day. Silas, my silent shadow, remains ever present, his watchful eyes a perpetual surveillance, a constant, suffocating reminder that freedom is a luxury I can no longer afford. Victor, the architect of my new reality, continues to test my limits, to push me further into the abyss, his unreadable gaze a constant challenge, a silent question of how far I am willing to go to survive. I am alive, yes, but my life is no longer my own. It is a tapestry woven with threads of danger, deceit, and moral compromise, a chilling realization that settles deep in my bones, a constant, suffocating weight that presses down on me, threatening to crush me completely. The world outside, the world of blueprints and clean lines, feels like a distant dream, a fading memory of a life I can never reclaim. I am bound to this place, to these people, to this darkness, an unwilling participant in a game where the stakes are always my soul, and the only certainty is the ever-present shadow of Victor's control, a control that tightens with each passing moment, leaving me forever suspended on the precipice of an uncertain, dangerous future, forever changed by the choices I was forced to make, forever haunted by the person I have become.